Hey everyone. I wish you a Merry Christmas. Please wish me a happy birthday. I made you a baby Krampus that I hope you enjoy. Wow, I just really can't sing. Though it doesn't make it any less funny now, does it? Now let's get back to business. As I so eagerly sang to you, I have made a baby Krampus figure. And I'm going to show you how I made him and tell you a little bit more about him. Plus, we gotta see it through Clayfect eyes. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, right off the bat, I doubled down when it came to armature wire. Simply because I wanted to make a little Christmas theming standing. And the last time that I tried to make something standing, the legs kept breaking. So I tried to hinder that by doubling down on anything that could make it a little bit stronger. I took my time with the armature. Actually, throughout the sculpture I took my sweet time. I am so behind on all my projects. But I wanted to do him right, and I wanted to challenge myself in some way with this sculpture, because otherwise, where would the fun in that be? So I started out carefully with some Sculpting ultralight to sort of shape out the torso, just to get an idea on how I wanted our little fella to stand. But while I make the armature and put some clay on his body, why don't I tell you about our little Krampus? First though, a quick disclaimer. I am not an expert in Christmas monsters, I am simply a go to Google. So, please don't come for me. Now, let me tell you about Krampus. Krampus is sort of the dark side of Santa Claus. He's a Christmas demon that runs around and punishes naughty children, while Santa Claus is the good guy that gives children gifts. Throughout time, children have been warned not to misbehave, because otherwise Krampus would come and punish them. The Christmas demon is described as a man-goat-like monster with a very, very long tongue and chains around his arms. He's also known to carry a basket on his back that he used to contain all the naughty children that he was going to kidnap. If you were on the naughty list but not that naughty, then he might just beat you with birch branches or even just give you a lump of coal. It all depended on the degree of bad behavior. Now, the legend of Krampus originated from Germany, but many countries have many different legends about this creature. Or should I say creatures, since many believe that Krampus is not one character, but actually a whole species for itself. Just like Santa's elf, you can say. Now here in Denmark, where I am from, there was not much of kidnapping and eating children, as he is known for elsewhere. It was mostly about the coal and the birch branch. And even further back in the day, before Christ, it wasn't even about punishing children, it was actually most about bringing light back into the world. Back then, Christmas, or Yule as we call it, were more like a carnival than it was a family gathering. Men was running down the street with birch branches, hitting things, wearing costumes, all to scare the evil spirits away and hopefully bring back the light. Or at least that's what I have learned. But again, there are so many different variations even in my little country. There are very, very different tales on how you started and what Krampus actually was and is. We also had another completely different variation of Krampus that was called Svartepiet, and I believe was a very angry elf. So don't hold me up to it, this is just my interpretation of the folklore of Krampus. But with the body done and textured, let's get back to the sculpture where I'm making the head. Now, I had a very difficult time figuring out how I wanted our little goat guy to look, because Krampus is a monster made to scare children and is not at all like the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot or Yeti, link down below by the way, that are more natural in their monstrosities, you can say. But this guy was made to just be scary and has been refined throughout time. So finding an angle and making this little guy look cute was quite the challenge. Also because I wanted him to be easy to identify. So when you looked at him, you know, oh, there's baby Krampus. That is why I gave him some puffy cheeks, but also gave him these yellow cat eyes, because to me they just screamed Krampus. And if I made him too cute, he would quickly just look like a fawn wearing Christmas clothes, and we couldn't have that. So that was why I quickly realized that a face wasn't enough to make this little guy cute. No, I needed to dress him up too. Which made half of the work I've done on the body completely useless and a waste of time. But that is art for ya. Sometimes you just don't know what direction is going to take. At this point of the process, I was pretty meh when it came to his face, because to me he did look like a baby Krampus, but also he wasn't that cute, now was he? So I knew I had to do something. Speaking of doing something, in a not at all smooth transition, I was speaking the truth in my little intro. When this video is posted, the 23rd, it is actually my birthday. So if you want to give me a birthday present that will make me smile from ear to ear, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and maybe even give me a comment. It really means the world to me and it helps my channel so much. It would be the best Christmas/birthday present you could ever give me. Now, let's get back to the sculpture, where I'm giving our little Krampus a Christmas hat. Before I started shaping out his little ear, now I already knew that the face wasn't going to cut it, so I quickly decided that I would give him a whole Christmas outfit that was going to look way too large for our little fella, since it is a baby Krampus. That would also help him look more like the Christmas demon that he was, instead of a fawn. Though before I started working on his clothes, I still needed to give him some more texture. As you saw when I made the body, I actually used 3 kinds of textures here. One to make it more long and scruffy, the other one to make it more puffy, and the last one to make it sort of just flat furriness thing. And I just think it worked like a charm. I am so happy with it. On this sculpture, I actually managed to use almost all the textures that I know, because after I had textured the fur, I was going to make some fluff on the trim on the hat. Now, for those of you who have watched my Yeti content, knows just how tired I am of this texture. But it wouldn't be a true Christmas hat without some fluff, so of course I was going to fluff our little Krampus up before I started working on his clothes. And I actually found that very challenging, because I've not made that much clothes. And this was going to be big, because it was going to look like he was sort of swimming in his Christmas jacket that was going to be way too large for him. So it was really challenging for me, but I also found it very fun, I have to say. I made the bottom out of cosplay simply because I didn't want it to break and I needed it to stay flexible, so I used the rest of my cosplay on the bottom, and I'm so happy that I did. It just worked like a charm. Now, while I dress our little Krampus and gave him some trim and a belt and start on the folds, why don't I tell you about Krampus flew Clayfect eyes? Now, it is hard to deny that a baby-stealing, human-eating demon isn't evil, and I will not try that. But if we think about it, then who is Krampus helping? He is one of Santa's helpers, right? And Santa comes first. So who actually raised Krampus to be the monster that he is? Yeah, you guessed it. Saint Claus himself, right? So can we really blame poor Krampus for running around beating children as he wants to, when he has not been taught anything different? Actually, he has been used this whole time to do Santa Claus's dirty work, making our big jolly fella look very good, while Krampus took all the blame. And if we see it like that, isn't Krampus actually the victim in all this? He hadn't even had the possibility to form his own identity besides of being Santa's helper. Personally, I think that Krampus secretly wished to become a gardener, since he is so fascinated by beating people with wooden sticks. I actually think that he longs to take care of trees and love being in nature. He might not be the best people person, but how many of us is? And given the chance, I'm sure we could get to change his diet. Giving the chance, I think he would be willing to change, just like the Grinch. And that's what I think about Krampus and his backstory. Now back to the sculpture, where I fluff up his Christmas hat tip thingy. I still don't know what it's called. Before I keep working on the trim, also fluffing that up. Now I use the same type of clay all around in the trim, simply because the fluff differs a bit depending on what kind of clay you're using. So I wanted it to look sort of cohesive, and that is why. But with his coat all nice, big and fluffed up, I could finally remove him from the wooden stand and see if he could stand by himself, and thankfully it worked. He was a bit wobbly, but I take it. It's still a figure standing on 2 feet that didn't break for me, so I'm happy. Now with his legs and torso done, I start working on the arms and making his little hands. Now at that point I had already decided that I wanted him to hold a sack of coal in one hand and a birch branch in the other hand, sort of again to symbolize that this is Krampus we're looking at. Now I made his fingertips sort of pointy because I want him to have some sort of claws. I didn't want them to be too defined because I didn't want to make him scary. But at the same time I also wanted this demonic look about him. But with his hands safe and secure, all I had to do was make the sleeve to the arm. And oh my god, the sleeve! Now, I did want this to look like it was way too big for him, meaning the sleeve also had to look like it was way too big for him, and it was so difficult. Not only to fit it so it looked realistic and put the folds right as you see me doing later, but also to make sure that it didn't look like that his arms were too long for his body. It was actually pretty difficult. That is why you see me switching over and working on the birch branch. Simply because I've stared myself blind on the arms at this point and I really just needed a break from arms. You can say that I branch out. Oh, no, I'm sorry, I will stop. I worked again a bit on my beloved arms before I deviated and then make the sack of coal that he was going to hold. That poor sack of coal flip-flopped so much between me and the sculpture just to make it fit in that it wasn't even funny. But I actually really enjoyed making this. Also putting the small clumps of clay that I decided to blend into the sack to make it look like that it is coal that is in the sack and not any kind of human remains. Again, to try to dial down the creepy factor from our baby Krampus. After that, I made the top of the sack before I started working on the rope that was going to be on it. I used clay here again to make it more durable. And with the sacks finally done, all I had to do was place it before I started working on the folds on that arm. Now, I usually love making folds of any kind, but I have to say I had a lot of difficulty with this sculpture. I was cursing and swearing and doubting myself the whole time. But I kept going and going until it looked right. And if I should give anyone that wants to sculpt any advice, just keep going until you're satisfied. You will get there at some point, I promise. When I finally was satisfied with the arms, all I had to do was give our little sack some texture before I started placing the sack and the birch branch, so it looked natural. Well, as natural as a baby demon Christmas monster can be, I guess. I have to say this sculpture was very, very difficult to make, but I am so happy that I challenged myself, and I am also pretty satisfied with the result. With all the elements placed, I decided to put an extra detail on the sack just to make it a little more interesting and a little less plain looking to look at. Now with some flat, I want the patch to make it safe and secure. All I had to do was give him a little bit of clay softener before our baby Krampus went into the oven. Finally baked and done, all he needed was some paint. Now Krampus has been portrayed so differently, going from black to brown to grey to white. So I quickly decided to make a brown gray. I did, however, repaint him once because I wanted his color to pop a bit more. They were a little bit too light for me because the coat and the hat, of course, should be red, but it shouldn't just be a normal red. I wanted blood red for a monster baby, so that is why I decided to repaint him later on. It's funny with traditions, isn't it? Remember when I told you that back in the day it was sort of a carnival? And we really don't have any carnival anymore. But on every seasonal festivities, we always have a lunch. Like when Easter comes, we have Easter lunch. And when Christmas comes, we have Christmas lunch. But it's not lunch like you think it is. Picture a group of people together where there's way too much food, way too much alcohol, and they act like rowdy teenagers. That is pretty much how a Christmas lunch is. It's even tradition that your workplace are hosting Christmas lunches. And let me just say, I think about 50% of all infidelity in my country comes from Christmas lunches. They are crazy. But then again, my people were Vikings back in the day. So maybe there's a little bit of Viking mentality still there. I don't know. Anyway, there's a little bit of Danish culture for you guys. Now back to the sculpture. With our Krampus repainted and looking just a bit more colorful, I start working on the details. Painting the belt a traditional black and gold. Before I dry brushed all the fur, just like I did with the trim, just to make the texture that I worked so hard on pop. I also dry brushed the sack, again, just to make it a little more interesting. And in true Christmas spirit, I painted the little patch in a green, just to get all the Christmas colors in there. All that was left to do now was painting the thread in a darker brown before I started shading our Krampus, where I used an even darker red, again just to emphasize all the folds that I had worked on. And with all the dry brushing and shading in place, all I had to do was clean our little guy up. And I think that is it for this sculpture and it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you like little Krampus. I am actually pretty satisfied with him. He was a tough one, but I think I managed. And now I have baby Krampus in my monster baby collection, and I couldn't be happier. With that being said, it is time for me to sign off. Merry Christmas to you all. I hope to see you next time. But if you can't wait until next time, why not click on the square to the right? Then you're going to see a little baby Yeti get made. It's cute and fluffy. But until then, bye!